Hi, my name is Scout Forsyth. I'm a professional ballerina with American Ballet Theater, and this week I'm going to show you how I customize and break in my pointe shoes. Oh. The life cycle of my shoes is pretty short. I've got 3 days. I usually spend about a half hour getting a full pair of pointe shoes ready. The first day is when I take them out of the bag, I customize them, I sew them, I do what I need to break them in and get them ready. By the second day, they're in the sweet spot and I'm wearing them throughout the whole day, not worrying about how they feel because they're perfect. And then on the third day is when I notice the breakdown. I start to feel the floor, my shoes aren't as supportive, and it's time to sew a new pair of pointe shoes. There's no other shoe in the entire world that can do what a pointe shoe does. Not a tennis shoe, not a flat shoe, and not even heels. There's nothing that allows you to go over on your toes unless it's a pointe shoe. I've had about 700 pairs of pointe shoes in my career, and I know ABT spends about $500,000 annually on pointe shoe budget alone. That's because each pointe shoe is handmade and they cost close to $100 per pair. Here's what I use to prepare my pointe shoes. I have floss, scissors, a knife, needles, a pen, and darning thread. The first thing I do is grab my elastic. I sew it in to the back of the heel. The reason I use this elastic and do the crisscross method is so my shoe is super secure to my foot. The reason we have floss is I use it instead of thread. Floss is way more sturdy and way more cost effective. I do 1, 2, 3 arms length of floss for usually 1 pair of shoes. I take the elastic and I line it up perfectly with the middle seam of the back of the shoe. Where you have your elastic position kind of changes how the shoe feels. If your elastic is maybe further down, you're not going to get as much movement within the shoe, and it's not going to bend as much. Where the further back it is, the less support you have, basically. So I like to find that sweet spot, and exactly where my arch hits the shoe is where that elastic goes. That's where it pulls the shoe to your foot and it bends in that perfect position, and it's the most secure for dancing as well. The shank is the internal support system that helps you stay up on releve. I don't know if you guys have seen that scene in Black Swan where Natalie Portman is de-shanking her pointe shoes, but some girls actually do that, and some girls half shank their pointe shoes, and what that does is it allows for less support under the arch. And so I think a lot of women who don't have the most flexible arches or want to have the appearance of their foot being even more pointed tend to take that out, so it bends more and it's easier to maneuver and control. If I did that, I would be falling out of my shoes and have absolutely no support. So the box is the whole tip of the pointe shoe, and that is where we stand on our toes. Darning is when you sew around the tip of the pointe shoes. The same thread that I used for this little middle piece right here, and it's just making tiny little knots around the edge and the tip of the pointe shoe. And what it does is it adds an extra little layer of support, so when you're on the tip of your shoes, you have a bigger surface area so you're not falling off. It keeps it contained just on the tip so it doesn't fray onto the vamp of your shoe. There's a darned shoe. So at this point, I'm done with any kind of sewing, cutting, stitching on my pointe shoe. And lastly, all I need to do is break it in before I wear it, because these babies are hard. The first thing I do is break in the shank, and I always go to this little line on the inside of where the shoe has its 2 separate parts of the box and the heel. And here we go. Nope, didn't make a noise. Sometimes it does. Right where I break in my shoe is exactly at the highest point of my arch. When your shoe breaks lower, there tends to be less support on there. So the higher up it breaks, the more support. And if it's right in where the arch hits, that's where you're gonna find that total, like, perfect zone. So then I take the heel of my foot and I step on the box of my pointe shoe and I smash it flat to widen it out. And then sometimes I don't get it enough, so I stick it in a door jamb and I yank it, and it gives that extra little crunch. Okay, so now that I'm finished customizing my shoes, they're ready to go, and I'm gonna head to the studio and take a little class and finish breaking them in over there. When I first put on the shoes, they do feel a little bit wobbly just because they're not fully broken in yet, and I really have to make sure that I am using the proper strength technique to make sure that I'm taking charge of the shoes and the shoes aren't taking charge of me. After class, my shoes are in peak condition and they are totally ready for a full 6-hour day, and I feel comfortable in them. I feel like I could go and do any show, any performance, any rehearsal that I need to in these shoes. Okay, so now I'm gonna show and tell you guys exactly why day 2 is the perfect day for my point shoes. Okay, so these are my perfectly broken in shoes, and watch these. Whoa! I love the way they feel. I just feel super lifted, but they're also broken in enough that I'm not forcing them to go either way. They're just so molded to my feet. I notice it a lot, especially in tendu, I'm able to like roll through the foot. Okay, now I can do a full day of rehearsal. Okay, that was a good workout. I hope you can understand why day 2 is my favorite day in point shoes. Hey guys, so it's day 3 and my point shoes are really starting to break down. I'm feeling my toes on the floor in the box of my point shoes, which is like, for me, the #1 sign of like, hey, these things are dying, which is a bummer, but it's starting to get a little dangerous for me to dance. So I'm gonna take you guys along and show you what I mean by point shoes really breaking down. So when I go up to releve, this is normally like my stopping point on these guys. Can you see how much further over I can go on these guys? Like standing on one foot, I almost have to be supported by the bar. Like I couldn't stand here like this. We call these in dancing shoes. Like it's just so unfortunate that like, oh, that I can't even do like ballet right now. See how they just come back because there's no support in these shoes. They look pretty, but they don't dance pretty. I'm going to show you guys how I jet glue my point shoes and get them ready for the day. This is something I do when I want to get a few more hours out of my shoes. Here are my shoes. They're pretty broken in, but like I can fully move the tip of my shoe. They're just definitely starting to get really broken down. So what I do is I take my shoe and flip the back part of it over so it's just out of the way. What you're gonna do is so this is my right foot. So see on the tip right here where the left is a little bit more worn out. So I take it, and that's where I start my jet glue, and I just go on the inside and I just go right around this area and I kind of dribble the jet glue in down like this, like there's lines in there. So then after I do that, I peel back the leather insole piece. So then I take the jet glue and I jet glue a little bit along the arch, just until the nail. And then I just do a little dot over there, and that's just to help reseal this, and then make sure it's really flat when you reseal it. And then voila, voila, your shoes are jet glued. So there's definitely certain things that I do that start to break down my shoes quicker. If I'm doing a variation where there's a lot of bourrées, piqué ménages, a lot of balancing, turns, that's where my shoes start to break down a little bit more. If I'm just doing a ballet where I'm doing more of a standing role, not so much demand on the dancing, and it's more of an aesthetic characteristic role and I've got point shoes on, I can make my point shoes last maybe 4 days. So it definitely depends on what I'm doing and what I'm dancing that makes the life of my shoe 3 days or 4 days. I dance in class with my jet glued point shoes, and by this time they're done. It's time to retire these shoes and to start the process all over again. And at ABT we've got a really awesome program where we take our shoes, sign them, throw them in the basket, and they auction those off for donations for ABT or with certain like ticket sales and stuff like that. So it's really cool. They kind of get recycled in that way. I know that 3 days for the lifespan of a pointe shoe seems kind of ridiculous and crazy, and trust me, there was a point in my life, especially when you're a student and you don't have the funds to just go and get 10 pairs of pointe shoes a week. You don't have the demand of a professional dancer. You do your class in the morning, you maybe work a private here and there, and then you do class in the evening and you're working on just solid technique, maybe a variation every once in a while. Me, I dance 6 hours every single day, and that's not including class. I'm constantly wearing and tearing on my shoes, so I need that support and that structure for the amount of time I'm on them and the demand of my dancing schedule. Keeping my pointe shoes at the optimum peak is just like keeping my body at the optimum peak. As a ballerina, like, my pointe shoes are an extension of who I am and what I do, so by keeping them in their prime, I'm keeping myself at my prime. Thank you guys so much for following along on my 3-day pointe shoe cycle. I hope you enjoyed the video. I certainly enjoyed giving you the information. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.